Good afternoon, everyone. It's really my great honor to introduce Henrietta Fore, our keynote speaker for the luncheon. I first heard Henrietta Fore speak in 2007. She had just been appointed to lead the U.S. Agency for International Development as its administrator, and its first, and so far only, woman to ever hold that position. I remember listening with interest as Henrietta talked about public-private partnerships and the innovative ways that we could unleash, that the private sector could help unleash ideas and solution and investment to help solve some of development's most challenging problems. The second time I ever heard Henrietta speak, she was talking about the imperative of revitalizing the talent and the vitality of USAID. And she talked about how important it was that the agency was forward-leaning and prepared for the challenges of the 21st century, and that it was reflective of the very best of what development could achieve. The third time I heard Henrietta speak, she was honoring the lives of our fallen colleagues, John Granville and Abdel Abbas Rahman. And I remember as she stood there with such grace and respect and dignity and compassion of how proud I was that she represented my government and our foreign assistance programs throughout the world. 5 years later, many of the initiatives and much of the vision that Henrietta Fore seeded then is taking bloom under USAID Forward today. But she hasn't let the grass grow beneath her feet since then. In the 5 years since finishing her tenure as USAID's administrator, Henrietta has continued to lend her talent, her ingenuity, and her commitment to the world stage. Through her work as the chairman and CEO of the Holsman International Manufacturing, Investment, and Consulting Firm, as co-chair of the Asia Foundation and the Women's Corporate Directors, as trustee of the Aspen Institute and Center for Strategic and International Studies, and as advisor to Coca-Cola and multiple other multinational and international corporations. In her spare time, she serves on the boards of the ExxonMobil Corporation, Theravance, the Committee Encouraging Corporate Philanthropy, Diagnostics for All, the Center for Global Development, the Initiative for Global Development, and the Middle East Investment Initiative. In 2009, Henrietta Fore received the Distinguished Service Award, which is the highest award that the Secretary of State can bestow. In 2005, she received the Alexander Hamilton Award, which is the highest award that the Department of Treasury can bestow for her work as the Director of the United States Mint. It is my great pleasure to introduce this extraordinary woman whose leadership and pioneering spirit, her energy, and her incredible grace has inspired 2 generations of civil servants, development practitioners, the private sector, and citizens in pursuit of a better world. I give you Henrietta Fore.
I think that's one of the most beautiful introductions I have ever heard. Would you all agree with that? Kate, thank you. It's a wonderful sisterhood in development. So, Kate, thank you. Catherine and Dan, thank you very much. And congratulations, Leila. This is a remarkable experience that you have had, and the contributions that you and Mohammed will be contributing are just exceptional, and it's important for all of us to really help the talent that is coming along, following in many of our footsteps, but many of the paths will be brand new, so thank you. I'm delighted to be here with the Society for International Development at the 2013 annual conference. I've gotten so used to calling this SID-Washington, it's almost difficult to say the full name. But I thank you all for being here and for sharing your experiences with one another. One of the greatest moments for me is to see so many friends on panels and in the audience today. And I'm sure that's true for all of you. There's something very unique about this particular field in that you really get to know each other. You become lifelong friends. You work in the field, you work in cities around the world together, and it's just, it's a wonderful, tight-knit family. Well, you've been hearing many speakers on a variety of international development subjects, from food aid reform to fragile states to urbanization to USAID procurement. And as a former administrator of USAID, I understand firsthand the roles and responsibilities that come with the challenges and the accomplishments of the public sector and how it relates to development. We all know that there's an intermix between executive and legislative branches of the US government and nonprofits and academia and businesses that become wells of information, along with that of the foreign governments and local entities that are both private sector and public sector. And they create a network that is deeply supportive of international development. But today I'd like to talk about the private sector and how private and public sectors can work together to form vital partnerships and thereby pooling and leveraging resources to maximize positive outcomes. So often misrepresented as the anti-hero of development, the private sector is, in reality, a critical engine for growth, capable of bringing ideas and investments and jobs to these developing countries, things that they need and want. Although many look to the private sector simply as a financial source, they in fact bring knowledge, skills, and unique perspective that is a great complement to the needs of government and other arms of the public sector. When President Thein Sein of Myanmar was here in Washington just 2 weeks ago, his number one request was to help in the area of agriculture in Myanmar. So how can we help the people of Myanmar? A synergistic collaboration of business, of nonprofits, of academia, and government with science and seeds and technical assistance and processing and financing and transport and local government policies and, yes, U.S. food aid reform. But with the support of many other companies, Myanmar is also growing. Coca-Cola has just opened their new plant there, and they have also begun a new program called 5x20. And it is making progress in enabling the economic empowerment of 5 million women entrepreneurs by the year 2020. To reach 5 million women, they're collaborating with governments and civil society and other businesses. They're addressing the most common barriers that women face in trying to succeed in the marketplace: access to business skills, training courses, financial services, and connections to peers and mentors, along with a very essential ingredient that it's difficult to measure, but it is that of building confidence, the confidence of having a successful business. What happens in all of these is that the company, in this case Coca-Cola, brings an asset that is also difficult to measure but invaluable, and it is access to the Coca-Cola network and also to the Coca-Cola supply chain. A few partners of Coca-Cola include the UN Women, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and TechnoServe. Let me turn to another example. As a major employer and investor in Africa, ExxonMobil is committed to working with its partners, local institutions, international NGOs, and governments to stop the spread of malaria on the continent. Since the year 2000, they have placed $110 million in funding that has reached nearly 83 million people. Their funding supports partners who help improve the delivery and use of bed nets, training healthcare workers, and providing technical assistance to help countries increase their capacity to control markets and malaria. But Exxon's support is more than financial. They actively partner with governments and agencies to assist them in developing disciplined, results-based business practices that are essential to combating malaria. They share their experience and workforce training, project and supply chain management, data monitoring and evaluation, and a knowledge of economics and marketing. Partners of Malaria Initiative includes AfriCare and Harvard School of Public Health and the UN Foundation, UNICEF, and USAID. But these business skills and techniques are an extraordinary asset in a partnership. By working more closely with the private sector and using public sector assistance to encourage private enterprise development, both sectors generate more effective development outcomes, saving lives, creating jobs, and promoting stability. Successful development abroad means more prosperity and security at home. With a global population expected to reach 9 billion people by 2050, we must maintain and sustain progress in all development areas in order to minimize volatility that might be caused by food and other shortages that could lead to political instability. In an effort to strengthen the role of the private sector in development this year, the CSIS Executive Council on Development issued a new report. It's entitled Our Shared Prosperity, A Vision for Global Prosperity, and it details the role of the private sector and the need for U.S. government to work more closely with the private sector and to understand the need to execute our planning and project development around the idea of broad-based growth, something that President Obama's Presidential Policy Directive also discusses. And I am told that there are 300 copies of this report outside the door, so we will hope that you will all pick one up and read it. I see many of you who participated in these discussions, along with Tom Daschle and Carly Fiorina and Tom Pritzker and Vin Weber and myself, and the project was led by our very own Dan Runde and Joanna Nesseth. The report is the result of work by the Council to develop an approach for the United States to seize the new global opportunity of utilizing current budgets and formulating public-private partnerships which will reduce poverty in developing countries and also can improve American lives. The Council recommends many concrete measures in the U.S. government and partners, things that we can undertake with current funding, and the three major pillars of this initiative are: first, to make broad-based growth the central organizing principle of U.S. development policy. Second, align the U.S. development instruments with the private sector. Third, promote trade and investment using existing but underutilized tools. A more specific target the report recommends is directing 25% of U.S. development assistance toward public-private partnerships. I would like to see a higher number, as many of you know, but this is a great first step. The report also recommends designating one bureau as a central office to coordinate all private sector engagement for the development agencies. It also suggests hiring personnel with backgrounds in the private sector to encourage exchanges between development agencies and business. An additional recommendation is that each U.S. embassy formalizes country-based systems for communicating with American companies and NGOs operating in-country. It recommends that USAID missions and embassies coordinate outreach to companies and design development, trade, and investment activities to leverage private investments for growth. They must also have greater flexibility in programming funds, designing projects and activities with partners. Further, the report recommends that U.S. development agencies and programs better utilize U.S. business operations to build training programs to enhance local workforces and prepare local companies to compete globally. By linking our trade, investment, and development policies far more closely, we will leverage their unique strengths in ways that work together. While the United States is a leader in the field of public-private partnerships, far more can be done to increase the breadth and depth of this expansion globally. Let me turn to two areas where the United States has large unmet opportunities and challenges for the years ahead. The first is Asia, and the second is the Middle East. In both cases, but for different reasons in cultures, environments, and history, they are seeking stability and growth. Like a coin, On one side is stability, on the other side is growth, inextricably linked. As the world recognizes the importance of Asia and its driving access to affordable food, water, and energy, the demands of its fast-growing middle classes is an all-absorbing activity. It has implications for all facets of development and business collaborations. An Asia Society report with Rhodium Group analyzed the benefits of Chinese foreign direct investment. The report estimated that by 2020, some $1 trillion to $2 trillion of new investment capital will have flowed out of China into the US, Asia, Latin America, and Europe. It will have an enormous impact on developing countries and change the patterns of development. As Chinese President Xi and President Barack Obama prepare for their meeting tomorrow at the former Annenberg estate, the flows of public and private investments, of intellectual capital and cybersecurity, of jobs and education will be a strong part of the discussion. Growth and stability will be foremost for Asian countries, as it will be foremost for countries in the Middle East and in the Maghreb. From mortgage finance facilities for Palestinian homebuyers to mobile banking for Tunisians, from creating jobs to inspiring entrepreneurs, the pairing of skills and capital for growth and stability will be a driving force for the next decade in the Middle East and North Africa. The public-private partnerships in all these countries need to be driven by local businesses and nonprofits, by civil society leaders and the diaspora, and linked with organizations and businesses in the United States and elsewhere around the world. The networks that all of you are aiding, fostering entrepreneurship and access to finance and education and job skills and training and science and technology and cross-border exchanges, these will be the fabric of social stability and growth. Finally, the question we all need to ask ourselves is, how do we get better in our work? I was in New York yesterday at the Committee for Encouraging Corporate Philanthropy with award winners who carried some of the future trends. So let me mention a few. The first is IBM for their Smart Cities Challenge. At the request of a mayor, they send in small teams of employees for 3 to 6 weeks to solve problems of how a city becomes a smarter city. So the first lesson here is that the leadership in a local community, it can be the mayor of Nairobi or of New Orleans, must define a problem and must ask for help. It must be locally generated, and local leaders must be passionate for development. Second, IBM is growing their own people. This work refreshes their scientists and engineers. It also refreshes businesses and nonprofits and government workers alike. They work in tight-knit teams looking for ways to solve problems. We all could do more of this. It becomes a learning experience where every public and private partner sends one of their people into a development team. Mosaic was also an award winner, and they focus on agriculture and increasing yields at the farm level. So the third lesson is to focus on what you want to accomplish, to get neither too broad nor distracted. The fourth trend that Mosaic embodied is a trend to give products and expertise rather than cash. Pharmaceutical companies have been donating drugs and hospital supplies, while companies like Mosaic increase the yields for smallholder farmers using their logistics and their expertise in agriculture and ecosystems. The fifth lesson was from partners in school innovation, and it is to measure every step. To measure before you design a program, and to measure for various stakeholders. This is what education, the Millennium Development Goals, and Congress have in common. The sixth lesson is to write a 1 or 2 page summary of a project so others can learn from it, and that you communicate and pass on your learnings inside and outside the SID network. And the seventh trend on how we can be better in our work is more partnering with entities in your same sector. So nonprofit organizations pairing with nonprofit organizations, private voluntary organizations pairing with private voluntary organizations, business pairing with business, local governments pairing with other local governments, so they become multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder, small effective teams focused on results. This is an interesting new trend. To our Western eyes, it can look like collaborating with your competition, but it means you really understand your partner, another sister NGO. It also means you can share the risk and financing if you're a business or a local government. Not only are public-private partnerships important and innovative paths to successful development, but they are rapidly becoming essential tools for growth in developing and developed countries alike. And new doors are opening every day to these collaborative opportunities on a global scale. So let us welcome them. Again, I thank you for being here and for all of you being here and talking with each other, and I would welcome any questions. So let me ask Dan Runde if he would like to come up and be our moderator. Thank you.